Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special LinkedIn Live edition of our show, Marketing Matters. I'm Barbara Kahn, the Patty, and J.H. Baker, Professor of Marketing, and I'm joined by my co-host, Americus Reed, the Whitney M. Young Jr. Professor of Marketing and the Brand Identity Theorist. Hello, Americus.
Hi, Barbara. It's great to be here. I'm so excited because, one of the things we do is talk about super iconic brands, the brands that basically stay culturally relevant and that people get excited over. And so what have we got today? It's going to be so exciting on this very special live session.
Yeah, we're excited to have another brand guy here with us in the studio today.
Yes.
And I'd like to introduce Chip Bergh, who's the former president and CEO of Levi Strauss & Company, where he served from September 2011 to January 2024. Welcome, Chip.
Hello, Barbara and Americus. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you today.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's really excited. And
Very
we're
cool.
thrilled to be hosting our featured guest here on the show today. And later on, we'll be taking live questions from everyone watching online. So make sure to put your questions in the comments section. And let's talk a little bit about Chip, because he's had such an incredible
Storied
career.
career, absolutely.
Yes, he has led many iconic brands during his 45-year career spanning the U.S., Asia, and Europe. He spent 28 years at P&G and Procter & Gamble in the roles of increasing scope and complexity in brand management, general management, and executive leadership. Among the many accomplishments, he led the creation and launch of Swiffer. He oversaw the turnaround of Old Spice. Isn't that one of your favorite brands?
Yes, absolutely.
And he was the first P&G executive to lead the iconic Gillette blades and razors business globally following P&G's $57 billion acquisition of Gillette in 2005. But at Levi Strauss, Chip has been credited with leading the company's storied turnaround and using his platform to take bold social stances. So, Chip, after all these years, what made you decide to retire now?
Well, I'm 66 and it's been a great run. And, I think leadership changes at the top, 10 years, 12 years, 13 years, 14 years as a CEO is probably the right amount of time. I have the energy and stamina, I think, that I could have done this job for another 4 or 5 years probably. But, I've been in the job for 12 and a half years. And we had an amazing successor who I brought into the company, and Michelle Goss, who was the former CEO of Kohl's, and she was ready. And I'm totally convinced that she is going to take the company to the next level. So it was time to move on. And I've been out of the job. It was 2 months exactly yesterday. And
wow, that's pretty fresh.
I know it's fresh, but I can honestly say I've been really, really busy. I miss all of my colleagues. I miss the fun of being at work, but I don't really miss the job because I know it's in really, really good hands with Michelle.
Oh, that's pretty exciting. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. How did you first get involved with Levi's, and what did the brand mean to you then?
Yeah.
Okay, so wind back the hands of time to sometime in the 2010s. I was running Gillette, a big global business. It was about $7.5 billion, and all of the male grooming brands at P&G, including Old Spice. So it was about a $7.5 billion global business. And I was actually in China at a leadership team meeting. I had my whole leadership team over in China, and I got a call from a headhunter who I knew. And I had gotten several calls for other CEO opportunities. And she said, I think I've got something you might be interested in. Eye roll, right? And I was like, okay, what is it? And she said, what do you think about Levi's? And the words out of my mouth were, oh, wow. It was a completely different reaction than any of the other calls that I'd gotten for a CEO opportunity. And, what flooded through my mind were two things. One, some of the vivid memories I had as a kid, my brand experiences with Levi's, and we can talk about that. And then the other thing is, I traveled all over the world in my prior job, and I lived in Asia for 7 years. And everywhere I went, you saw Levi's and Levi's stores. And I thought at the time that this was probably a $10 billion business. And it wasn't until I started really digging into what was going on at Levi's that I discovered it was, about a $4 billion business at the time. And so anyway, I do like to say everybody has a Levi's story. I started doing homework on the company. The bottom line was the company peaked in 1996 at $7.1 billion in sales. And then the next 5 years saw massive shareholder value destruction as revenues deteriorated from 7.1 to about $4 billion. And then the next decade, the 2000s, the company just kind of bumped along between 4 and 4.2, $4.3 billion in revenues. I have 2 grown boys who today are 41 and 36. When they were teenagers, they never had owned a pair of Levi's. It wasn't even in their consideration set. So I went back to kind of my days as a kid. When I was going into 7th grade, I asked my mom to drive 3 towns over so I could get a pair of Levi's to go to middle school.
Right.
Because only the cool kids wore Levi's.
Right. That's so
Marcus knows cool kids.
Wow.
Cool
Yes,
kids.
Cool kids. That's
Cool
right.
kids.
There's a red tag.
And I'm a brand guy. And so my whole hypothesis was if we could make the brand what it was when I was a kid, that would turn the brand around and that would turn the company around because the brand is 85% of the company's revenues. So the going in hypothesis was the fundamental issue here is a branding issue. And if we can make the brand cool again, put it back at the center of culture, have it resonate with youth, with young people again, that would turn the business around.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah,
So that's that's one thing to say. It's quite another thing to actually do.
Right.
So you want to make the brand cool. Like, what was your first instinct? How do you make a brand cool?
Well, there were a bunch of other kind of fundamental issues with the company. The first thing was we had to start marketing the brand again. So during the dark days, as the company's revenues tumbled, we had piled up a mountain of debt. So we were $4 billion in revenues, earning about $300 million before tax profits, and our debt level was over $2 billion. Our debt ratio was 5 to 1. We were one notch above junk bond status.
And that's what's brought down a lot of retailers.
Yeah,
and stuff.
and at the end of the day, the strength of the balance sheet is everything, and our balance sheet was a constraint. We were actually spending more money on interest payments when I joined than we were in marketing, in advertising the brand globally. Right? And so the first, so to put the brand back at the center of culture, we had to start marketing it again. And to start marketing it again, we had to clean up our balance sheet. So there were steps that we needed to take in order to set the conditions for success to rebuild the brand.
So let me just dig in on that a little, because what you're saying is you're under this massive amount of debt, and your solution is to spend more money.
Right. Yeah. So what do I need to do to spend more money? I need to pay down the debt to free up all that interest expense that we were spending to invest that back into brand building. So that's fundamentally what we did. I mean, the company, perverse things happen to companies that don't grow for 15 years. We got fat. We had, vice presidents not managing any people. We became like a bank. And when people aren't getting their bonus every year, the only way you move ahead financially is to get promoted. So the only way to get promoted is surround yourself with poor performing people so that you look good. and so there were lots of organizational issues. And anyway, we were fat, and there was clearly an opportunity to restructure the company, simplify things, and free up a lot of cash to pay down the debt and then begin investing back in the brand. And so we did that. We went through a big restructure in 2013 or so. And in 2014, we really started to seriously invest back in marketing. We also had to fix the marketing. That was another thing, but we can talk about that too.
Well, let's do that.
Okay.
Because this is Marketing Matters.
Yes.
And what we
And
really
marketing
want.
does matter. The brand here really did matter.
Thanks for that nod, Chip. We appreciate that.
No, so that's interesting. The first thing you did is you had to do control. You had to do restraint. You had to get, cut the fat out of the system.
Bring
do a lot of
discipline
costs.
back in,
Discipline.
financial discipline, and brought 28 years of P&G marketing discipline too. So,
Nice.
And that's a conservative brand. It's an open-minded brand, but it is also conservative, back to basics kind of idea.
And we took marketing at Levi's back to basics.
Back to basics.
We were going to test our advertising. We were going to prove that it was going to work. We were going to put money behind it. We were going to run heavy up tests. If the heavy up tests worked, we were going to expand the heavy up tests. And that's part of how we built it over the ensuing couple of years.
Okay, so that was the first year. That's what you were doing. And then you started taking money and investing in brand. So the first thing is make sure you manage your costs and your debt.
Right.
The second thing is don't let that not let you invest in a brand.
Right.
Because you can imagine
Brand
both
is an
kinds of
asset.
things. Either you spend too much and you're a mess,
Right.
so then you've got to rein it in. But then you can't be reining things in so much that you
Right.
don't continue
Well,
to
and
invest in
we
the brand.
were spending money in marketing. We were just not spending it well and spending it on things that were growing the business. So redirecting what we were spending into things that were going to work.
Yeah. I want to unpack that just a little bit, Barbara. Chip, so you said this. There was this period in time where kind of things went dark, and the brand sort of lost its cultural relevance, and so we have to start now cut costs and really invest in the brand because brand is an asset, just like you were saying, Chip. So when those eyes awoken to like, okay, we have to become culturally relevant again. What did you look at the difference in culture across that time period that says, okay, now we need to kind of fit into this conversation, this new cultural conversation? What were the trends? What were the things that were different that were from the earlier times where the brand was really built strong in that cultural relevance? Were there things you could see where it's like we need to kind of be in these spaces or having these types of conversations? How did that look?
I mean, I went back, you would all do the same thing. Any really good marketer would go back. But
we muse about all kinds of things.
But
we're actually doing this.
the best way to try to figure out your way forward is go back to what worked in the past, right? So, pull out the historical reel. Look at the advertising that worked to build the business, to build the brand from the 70s and 80s and 90s, and what were the big things that this brand did that worked really well. And there were some insights there. Music was really important. Not being too serious about ourselves was really important. Some of our best advertising had a little bit of a nod and a wink to it, was really important. It was about younger people. There was a little bit of sexual attraction or sexual tension, if you want to call it that. That always works in advertising. And so, and then we had some very, very iconic campaigns that we ran during the heydays. The 501 Blues is a very, very famous campaign. It was music and it was all about product. And so our advertising when I joined the company was dark. It was almost like film noir. It was almost too intellectually stimulating, and it wasn't really connecting with the consumer.
So let me just, before you continue on that, how did they go so far wrong?
Right.
Man? If they had such a rich legacy, how did they get to the point where you had to undo it?
I think when you're really, really successful, you start resting on your laurels, and not just from a marketing standpoint. I think this was true company wide. You kind of begin to believe your own press reports and think that when you're successful, nothing will go wrong. And when we were $7.1 billion in sales, one of the things that caused us to decline to $4 billion over a couple of years, we lost our biggest customer. And it was hubris at the end of the day. And I think hubris is kind of the kiss of death to an organization. And it's one of the things over the 12 years that I was there, you got it. When you wake up in the morning, if you're not the fastest one running, somebody's going to get you.
Yeah.
Right.
Art
of war. And so this notion of really continuing to stay hungry, continuing to stay humble, and, not believing your own press reports forever, I think was really, really important. But there was a degree of arrogance or hubris to our marketing, and it was kind of intellectually really interesting, and I could see how they got to it. But if you go back to the principles of what the marketing was that really connected with consumers in our best days, it was missing all of it. There wasn't, it wasn't music, it wasn't dance, it wasn't culture, it wasn't really culturally relevant. And so that was key to it. I had this big insight. One of the things I loved to do, especially in the early days, and we can talk about some of the other things I did during the early days, but in, big global business, I was out in the markets and traveling to the markets. And one of the things I love to do is consumer research when I'm in a market, right? And a consumer in-home or a consumer shop-along. And there are a lot of people who say, that's qualitative. You're never going to learn anything doing that. But when you do one or two every market, and you're doing 20 markets a year, 25 markets a year, that adds up. And at some point you begin to get a gut feel. But I think it was my first trip in this job to India, and I was in Bangalore, and we had recruited, I was going to do an in-home with a young woman, 27, 28 years old. She had been specifically recruited because she was a denim head. She owned lots of denim.
Such a thing?
That's an
Denim
identity.
head. Oh, yeah. There are denim heads.
The denim heads are out there.
And they're out there, and you know who you are. But she was a denim head, and she owned about 10 pairs of jeans. And so she was recruited specifically for that reason. She didn't know who I was or why we were there, but she figured it out that we were talking about denim. But anyway, when you do these in-homes, it's an hour, and it was myself, the country manager, we had a translator, although this woman spoke perfect English. Turns out she went to university in the UK. And we had somebody from the research firm as well. And you start really wide. Tell me about yourself and how do you spend your time? Where do you work? Blah, blah. You start really, really wide. And then over the course of the next 40 or 45 minutes, you kind of zoom into denim and start talking about denim and what brands do you buy and why do you buy them? And then in the last 10 minutes or so, I was like, can we see your jeans? And she's like, yeah. Come on in. And she brought us into her bedroom, opened up her wardrobe, pulled out the jeans. The facilitator asked if she could lay them out on the bed. We had her specifically lay out Levi's as the last two. And then we went kind of one by one. What do you wear these for? And she had all the premium brands. She clearly, was a very, very well-traveled individual.
A well-traveled
and so she had,
denim head.
Hudson, she had Page,
yeah.
she had a lot of the premium brands, Guess, and we went one by one, like, what do you wear these for? What do you wear these for? And the last two were Levi's. So we got down to the second to last pair, and she said, well, these are my go-to jeans. When I'm meeting my girlfriends for a cup of coffee in the mall, this is what I'll wear. If I'm going out shopping on a Saturday, these are my go-to casual jeans. It's like, okay, what about these? Silence. Gets a little wispy. And she says, well, to be honest, I don't even wear those jeans anymore because they don't fit me. But those are the jeans that I have when I went to university. And she said, all my memories of university are in those jeans.
Oh, wow.
And then she said, I get goosebumps every time I tell this.
Sure.
She said, you wear other jeans, but you live in Levi's.
Ooh.
And I was like, that's it. That
it.
is the idea. I've been saying all along, everybody's got a Levi's story. And it is about living your life in Levi's. And that became the selling idea behind our advertising. And it's now 10 years later, and we are still using that line.
That's incredible. I love that idea, Chip, because I think that sometimes we start chasing these hardcore quantitative types of surveys because they feel like they're really valid and objective, and we've got a number, here's an average of something or whatever. But what I love about what you're talking about is that sort of like go out into the wild, like Jane Goodall. You're out in the jungle and you have to study these people, because I don't think that insight about I live in these Levi's jeans would have come out in a survey.
Yeah, or that I'm not going to throw those jeans away because they've got the memories of college or university.
That's
in them.
powerful.
And
that's brand.
That speaks to the power that this brand has.
So once you had that big insight, did you then test it before you went out with it?
Yeah, we developed that. So I switched agencies because the other agency refused to move off of the prior idea. And I had asked them for an alternate campaign. And I knew this agency well because they worked on one of my brands when I was at P&G, and I knew the team pretty well, and they just refused. And so
Why did they refuse, Chip? That's bizarre.
I think they were really committed to it, and
They thought it was the right decision.
Yeah, they thought it was right, even though it wasn't moving the needle on the business. And I just asked for an
clearly
alternate
not right.
campaign. I didn't say I was going to run the alternate, So anyway, so we had this idea now, live in Levi's, and we went to a new agency, and they developed advertising to it. We tested it. It tested great. We put it on air. We tested it in a heavy up market. We were spending about 4.5% of revenues in marketing at that point. I'm a CPG guy where 15% was kind of like the norm.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, what an opportunity here. And we're now spending in the neighborhood of 7 or 7.5% of revenue. And I still think there's opportunity for us, but the heavy ups were working, and we just kept putting more money behind it.
So let's just switch gears a little bit because the couple things we want to talk about. One of the things that's
I am a
interesting.
storyteller. I warned you.
No, I'm happy to hear these stories. That's what we want to hear. But I'm also curious because I know Levi's, and you've embraced social issues. And so one of the things is rebuilding the brand. The other thing, and we've talked about this a lot, what's the role of a brand in purpose-driven marketing and social issues, important issues like voting, LGBTQ IA plus equality, immigration. Those are polarizing issues. How do you decide what to embrace and what not?
Yeah. So, first of all, the first thing I will say is this is not about me. This is about the power of the platform of the role of CEO at Levi's. And part of the reason the board wanted an internal successor was that they understand how we process all of this and how we decide what issues we're going to stand for and which ones we're not. Many of the issues that we've taken stands on predate me. So LGBTQ, we've been doing this for a long time, and our brand is very, very tightly associated with it, and it is part of who we are. Others are new though, and so taking a stand on ending gun violence in the U.S. specifically is a relatively new issue for us, and we had a very thorough process to vet it, number one, and to work it with our board of directors, because there's a governance role that they've got to play here to make sure that we don't do something stupid. And so let's take ending gun violence as an example. How did we get into it? We have 250 or so at the time. This was 2016. We have roughly 250 stores or so in the United States. And our store managers came to me saying, we're concerned. People are walking into our stores brandishing a gun in open carry states, right? Wow. And they were like, we've got a company policy. You can't bring a gun to work. You can't bring a weapon to work. And when somebody walks in with a gun, you don't know if they're a good guy or a bad guy. And you worry about the safety of your own employees and other customers in the store. And so this was right before the election in 2016. And we went to school on what have other retailers done. And there were a couple like Starbucks and Target who had already kind of been the tip of the spear on this one to some extent. And their approach was to publicly just put out a notice, don't bring a gun into our stores. And they took some blowback for it. Anyway, we were going to hold off until after the election until a gun went off in one of our stores.
Oh, geez.
So a guy was in the dressing room, had a gun in his pocket, and when he took his pants off, the gun went off, literally shot himself in the foot. So, but it could have been an employee. It could have been you or me or one of our kids.
Right.
It could have been, some innocent bystander. And that was it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. So we put this letter out that had already been pre-written and cleared with the board that, please don't bring a weapon into our store. And of course, there was huge blowback. I had unmarked police in front of my house for a while. I had death threats.
Oh, wow.
But it was the right thing to do. And so that got us into this debate. And then the Parkland shooting happened in 2018. And And I was like, look, we're already in for this. Let's go big or go home, because this is now an issue that youth were mobilizing behind. And the Parkland youth in particular, if you remember back after that, they were mobilized. And it's like, let's empower them. And so, again, working with the board, we were going to do a 1-year program. And the board was like, no, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it big. Go big or go home.
Yep.
And so we committed to a 4-year. We created a special fund of $1 million to fund these mostly youth organizations. We also worked with Giffords, Gabby Giffords' organization, which is really committed to ending gun violence in this country, and the Sandy Hook Promise. So other organizations as well that are committed to changing the legislation. We're not about repealing the Second Amendment or anything else. This is about common sense legislation that would reduce the risk of gun violence in this country, that is broadly supported by weapon owners, by the way.
Right.
And it has been something that we've been committed to now for more than 4 years. And we're going on, I think, year 6 or 7 now. And we played a role when the legislation passed Congress about a year and a half ago. We mobilized the business community. And I got 500 plus CEOs to sign a letter to Congress to pass that legislation. And I've been told the business community played a role in getting that legislation. It's the first meaningful gun legislation in over 10 years. The last thing I will say about this, again, I'm a storyteller, sorry.
No, it's great.
We know that this is one of the biggest issues with young people in this country. It's second to climate change. Think about the kids that go to school. They're practicing lockdown drills. My daughter went to elementary and middle school in San Francisco. They practice lockdown drills more than they practice earthquake drills. And it's a reality that, now almost 60% of adults know somebody who has been affected by gun violence. So it's touching everybody.
What I just wanted to summarize what I'm hearing you say. So you haven't taken on a lot of issues. You don't take on the flavor of the month issue.
Right.
But you take on an issue like LGBTQ in the beginning that's really true to your brand. The second issue was true to your retail environment.
Yep.
And then you go big or go home.
Right.
So then once you go into it, you double down on it.
Exactly.
And so if there's negative, I imagine everything you're saying sounds really positive to me, but if there is some negative, you're willing to take that trade-off because it's been very thoughtful and you're going to go into it with very well thought out reasons. Is that true?
That and you summarized it better than I told the story, actually, but that's exactly right. And in fact, I have said, one of the biggest challenges we have is we are known for taking these stands. So we get hit up for everything, right? Can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? And if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. So it is strategic, and it is about the halo that it provides over the brand, and it has to be consistent with the brand. And when you talk to people about Levi's, they will say Levi's is a strong brand. It is a brand that is about using its authentic voice. It is all about empowering people. And so that's why voting rights, democracy, all of that is really, really important. When the Berlin Wall came down, the kids on the wall were all wearing Levi's.
That's
incredible. Hope he took a picture of that.
Yeah, somebody did.
Somebody did.
It's a very famous picture.
It's a famous picture. I love that point, Chip, because I want to build on that a little bit and take it in a little bit of a slightly different direction. One of the things that is a theory about why you get involved in purpose-driven marketing is because not only does it signal something to the marketplace of consumers, it also signals something to people you would attract as human talent. Can you speak on that?
Definitely. When I joined the company, one of the things I did is I went on a listening tour and I asked the top 60 people in the company 6 questions. What are the 3 things that have to change? Turnaround. What are the 3 things that have to change? What are the 3 things you think we have to keep? What's the one thing you hope I will do? What's the one thing you're afraid I might do? What's the one piece of advice you have for me? And I always forget the 6th question. And
those are 5 pretty good questions. I hope someone's writing them down.
5 great questions. I sent them to the same questions to everybody, and then I met with the top 60 for about an hour. And I thought it would take 40 interviews to come up with a clear picture. No, it was very, very clear early on. But one of the things we had to keep were our values.
Interesting.
This was, people joined the company, and people through the worst period of time in the company's history stay with the company because of who we are and what we stand for. So the purpose of the company, which we talk about as profits through principles, not being afraid to take a stand on important social issues, that we exist. And this goes all the way back to Levi Strauss himself, the founder. We're in business to do more than just make a buck for the shareholder. We are in business to be a force for good in the world.
I love hearing this.
I know.
This is so great.
This is fantastic.
You do kind of bring tears to our
I know, right?
eyes with this kind of thing. It's great. So let me shift gears one more time before we go to our questions from our audience and ask you about. So you were talking about 2016. That was a really polarizing time. A lot of these issues were coming up, and brands were grappling with that. And you gave us, in my mind, a very strong strategy for how to deal with it and what's noise and what's signal and what your brand's going to mean. But right after 2016, you might remember 2020 came. And
Yes.
now
Kind
you've
of do
got.
remember that.
So, leading a brand during uncertainty like that, and we were talking about that previously, you don't know from one year to the next how to deal with that. How do you do that from a leadership position, deal with all this uncertainty that the pandemic handed you?
So I will say, as a CEO, that was CEO for 12 and a half years, the last 4 or 5 years were so much harder than the first 5 or 6 years. Even, first 5 or 6 years, I was dealing with a broken business and doing a turnaround. But the uncertainty that the pandemic caused, it changed me as a leader. And I think leadership has fundamentally changed as a result of the pandemic too. When you're zooming into somebody's home and they're sitting at the kitchen table with their 5-year-old pulling on their sleeves because they can't get on iPad to Zoom into school, I developed a completely different sense of empathy and a sense of responsibility for every single person in the company. And so when the pandemic happened, funny story, the day before we went into lockdown, we were talking about testing remote work for 3 days straight globally. And I was getting pushback from the IT organization because they weren't sure if we would break the IT pipes if everybody stayed home and worked remotely. And the next day we were all locked down.
Wow.
And
A little bit of luck and skill.
well, no, we had no idea if it was going to work. So better to be lucky than good, is what I would say. But all of our stores closed. I look back, we went into lockdown, I think it was March 20th. And we thought it would be till the end of March. We thought it was going to be 2 weeks. And we had stores closed for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, depending on the part of the world. But we declared a couple of things very, very early on, principle-based. Number one, we're going to put our employees first. The safety of our employees, especially our frontline employees, we had 3,200 stores globally, was going to be first and foremost, that we weren't going to jeopardize health. And in fact, we rolled out healthcare benefits to our part-time workers here in the U.S. specifically, because around most other parts of the world, they're taken care of. But here in the U.S., hourly workers are not. And so we put a safety net in place. Second, we did have to lay people off during the pandemic because the business, we normally did, call it $1.5 billion a quarter. That first quarter, when we went into lockdown, we did less than $500 million of revenue. Wow. And that was all the 2.5 or 3 weeks before we went into lockdown. We did basically nothing the rest of the quarter, a little bit e-commerce business, but that was it. And we didn't know if this was going to last for another 2 weeks or another 2 years. And so we had $1 billion of cash. We went from being really debt heavy to we had a lot of cash on our balance sheet. And I was like, that's enough for about a year. Let's go get another $500 million. And we went and got more cash on the balance sheet immediately because we didn't know. And so it was it was the first time in my career I didn't have a forecast. We had high, medium, and low. That's all that's
scenarios.
That's how we were running the business through the pandemic. But the other thing we did, we said we wanted to exit the pandemic stronger. And we said we wanted the brands to exit the pandemic stronger. And so the team, this was not my idea. Most of the good successes that we've had, by the way, were not my idea.
thought he was gonna say the
I've been blessed with really a great team, and but the team came up with this idea of doing a 501 concert series streamed from the living room of different artists.
Right.
And at 5:01 p.m. every day.
Nice. Reinforced brand, too.
Reinforced the brand. It was the 501 concert series. We were going to do it for 30 days. It was such a success. We extended it, and I think we did it for about 3 months during most of the lockdown, really. And some amazing things happened, but people were connecting with the brand online with these music series. And it was magic. So the creativity that came out during the pandemic was something that I just wanted to bottle up and say, let's not lose this.
Well, there's theory about that. 100%. To be most creative, you need constraint.
100%. And in fact, in our innovation program, we use sustainability as a constraint. It's like all of our innovation is wrapped around sustainability. How do we reduce the use of water in manufacturing? How do we get rid of the harsh chemicals in our supply chain? And when we land on solutions, we then open source them to our competitors, because it's like, this isn't going to be we use less water. It's not a competitive advantage. Nobody cares.
Right. Right.
But if we all use a lot less water, that's going to be really good for planet Earth, right?
Right.
And so we've open sourced these things.
That's a great marketing strategy, in my opinion.
That's very good.
So we're almost ready to ask other people questions, but I do want to ask, what do you think was the highlight? So you talked about difficult years starting, and then, the pandemic. If you had to look back, what would you say was some of the things you're the most proud of, or the highlight of your reign?
The first would probably be my team. And even as I've transitioned the leadership now over to Michelle, most of my team is still in place. And I think that speaks to the quality of the succession with Michelle and really setting her up for success. And really not just my executive team, but pretty broadly. Because it is, at the end of the day, as CEO, you're making the strategic calls, you're making capital allocation decisions, and you're making people decisions. And so it really is about the team, and that's probably the thing I'm most proud of. But, we took this company and this brand that was very, very broken. The brand today, by all metrics, is stronger than it's ever been. And in fact, when we were working on succession, the board was like, just go find another you. We're real happy with you. Just go find another you. And I was like, no, we don't need another me. We need somebody with a different skill set. The brand is now broke. The brand that was broken is now fit. It's strong. It's strong, strongest it's ever been.
Right.
We're now becoming a retailer.
Right.
45% of our revenues, roughly, is in our own direct-to-consumer business. It was 20% when I joined. We need somebody who's got really strong retail and digital chops. And that's what we went out and we got. We hired Michelle Goss, who was CEO of Kohl's. She joined the company as president. She kind of took a step backwards in her career to come and learn the business, learn the company, learn the brand, form her agenda while she's still not in the chair, so that day one, when she got in the chair, she's ready to go. And so succession is also something I'm really proud of. And then probably the third thing is we took the company public back in 2019. Right. And
why did you do that?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are like, why would you take a company public? And actually, we went public as dual class, so the family still has voting controls. So in some ways, we have the benefits of being private, but we're public.
Right.
So why did we go public? And it's a good question. Number one, we're in 5th and 6th generation, and now even 7th generation shareholders in the family. Okay, so it's been a long time since Levi Strauss. And when you do the math, every generation owns fewer and fewer shares because they all have kids and they're splitting them, right? So today, our single largest shareholder holds about family shareholder holds about 18% prior to the IPO. And, you play that forward in another generation or two, the largest shareholder will hold 2%. So number one, it's a question of how do you govern a company when the largest shareholder is 2%? It's kind of hard. It's already difficult because we already have about 100 family members. And then when you add in their trusts and other legal entities, a lot more than that. 2 is some family members wanted liquidity. And 3, I firmly believe that being a public company, we will never have a 15-year stretch of underperformance. because the public investors won't stand for it. It will make us a better company,
discipline.
more strategic, more disciplined, and that kind of underperformance for an extended period of time would never happen as a public company.
It's pretty interesting.
That's amazing.
All right. Well, I guess now we've gone right up to the time. It's to hear from our wonderful audience.
Yeah.
And if you have any burning questions for Chip, as you can hear, he's pretty well, he thinks pretty clearly. He's a very strong and admirable leader. I mean, I've been very impressed.
Yes.
So drop your comments in the comment section below, and we'll do our best to address them and ask them of Chip. So let's start out with the first question here. Given the challenges we're seeing in the retail industry now, today, with big retailers shutting down or going bankrupt, how would you begin to approach reshaping the industry? What do you think needs to change? And what I thought was pretty interesting, just to build on this, is you said you were moving from a brand to a retailer. I mean, that's a pretty interesting statement.
Yeah, the brand is still really important, to be clear, but you know, one of the strategic choices we made 12 and a half years ago, right after I became CEO, we made 3 big strategic choices to turn the company around: to drive our profitable core, to expand for more. We were underdeveloped in women's, we were underdeveloped in tops. There were lots of places within our portfolio where we had meaningful room to grow. International was underdeveloped, so that was expand for more. And the third big choice was to become a leading world-class omni-channel retailer. And that was driven by walking through department stores, mostly here in the U.S., but also around the world, where I'd walk in, I won't name names, but you walk in and see the Levi's pad and it looked like a nuclear bomb went off there. and like, I'm a brand guy. That's our brand. Are you kidding me? That's how you're treating us?
Right.
And in our own store, we can control the consumer experience. We can give them an experience. We can give them a differentiated assortment, and we also get the benefit of having that one-to-one relationship. So DTC really became strategic for us 12 and a half years ago, and we've gone from 20% of revenues to 45% of revenues on a revenue base that's 40% bigger. So it's been really central to the turnaround. And I do think, you know, there's a big question: what's the role of department stores in today's world, right? You know, Macy's got an activist in their stock. Nordstrom's trying to go private again. I mean, there is kind of,
and we're not even talking about JCP and Sears.
And and JCPenney had to go private. You know, so there's real challenges in departments. And to be clear, they're all customers, and I love them all, and they play a very important role from a distribution footprint standpoint for us. But they're being nibbled away at from all edges, right? You've got Amazon and the online retailers, you've got the off-pricers, you've got the club stores, and then you've got vertical retail for a lot of the brands that they've got in their stores. And if you want to buy Levi's, what's the point of going to Macy's if you can go to a Levi's store? Well, the point is, if you're buying Levi's and 10 other things, Macy's may be a good stop, right? So that, I'm picking on Macy's, that's unfair. There is kind of...
We're hopeful about Tony Springs.
Tony's amazing, and I'm hopeful for all of these customers, and they do play an important strategic role for the company, and we don't reach that many places with 275 stores in the United States. We need that wholesale distribution, and we need that shopper in wholesale. So it is clearly for us, our strategic priority is, you know, to continue to double down. We had an investor day almost 2 years ago, and we said we want to get it to 55% of our revenues. So that is...
So let me ask you, and then I'll get back to their questions. I just want to build on this for a second. So you're believing in physical retail as well as omni-channel retail. And what a lot of people are saying is that physical retail is changing to experiential. In fact, Tony Springs has said that he's going to bring retail theater into Macy's.
Right.
So do you have a stance on that, on what that means, customer experience, retail theater? So I think,
yes, I agree with it. I do think there has to be a differentiated reason for why a consumer would walk into a Levi's store versus ordering it online from Amazon. It's a lot easier to just order it online from Amazon and have it show up on your doorstep. And it is about things that you can get done in the Levi's store that you can't get done online. It's about a differentiated assortment, but we've got tailor shops in almost all of our mainline doors where you can buy a trucker jacket and then you can personalize it. You can customize it so that it is yours. And that is a little bit of retail theater, but it's also an experience. They'll also, by the way, bring in your old jeans, and if you've got, holes or rips or you want to tailor it a little bit differently, our tailors are amazing and they will do that.
You know what that is? To me, that's the Genius Bar in Apple.
It's our version of the Genius Bar, and we've talked about it that way. It is exactly that. And it gives the consumer a reason to come in. I mean, there have been sororities that have held parties at the tailor shop. I mean, there are, but it provides that theater and that opportunity for personalization and customization. But beyond that, you have to have the service. I think the assortment needs to be somehow differentiated as well. So our mainline stores tend to have higher tier products than what you would find in most wholesale customers. More tops, a different mix of men's and women's. So all of that,
brings people in the store.
It brings people into the store, but it also helps build the brand. I mean, it is a big brand building thing for us too.
So a question that we got from our audience is, how has Levi started to leverage emerging technologies such as AI, virtual reality, augmented reality?
Yeah, and I would say we jumped on the AI data science stuff before Gen AI pretty early, and we've had hits and misses, I guess is what I would say. We built a pretty decent sized organization over a relatively short period of time, and have had some successes in using AI in particular for assortment planning, demand and supply matching, things like that. A lot of back office use as well, and using bots in back office to kind of speed the processing of a lot of transactional type data. The Gen AI stuff, we've had multiple experiments going on. Some have worked, some haven't. I would say it's still early days. We have made investments during my time, some of which I wish I could kind of take back, honestly, because I think we fell in love with the idea of faster than, and again, my middle name is discipline, and we were a little bit undisciplined, I think, in going after chasing a lot of the potential big ideas here. We invested a lot in trying to completely automate our supply planning, and I would say that was not successful, and we spent a lot of money on it. And so instead of testing small and kind of scaling as we should have done, we fell in love with the idea faster than the idea proved itself.
Interesting.
And we wound up, making some mistakes along the way. Live and learn. I do think, if you're running a business and you're not experimenting with this stuff and getting experience,
right,
you're missing the boat on something.
So
because
you should, live
this
and learn.
This is clearly where the puck is going. And,
right.
And I think the real challenge is, where do you begin testing it and getting experience with it? And is it with consumer-facing activities, supply chain related activities, marketing related? A lot of companies are using it for media and media planning and things like that. And I think you have to be really, really thoughtful about where and how you get started.
We got a few questions that are kind of pedestrian, I'll say, but it's kind of interesting. One of them came in is like, what's the right way to wash jeans?
Oh, that's the reason is because I'm going to my grave. I said at a sustainability conference, it was one of the first conferences I did. This was probably like 2012 or 2013. And denim heads, back to denim heads, they will tell you never put a pair of jeans in the washing machine. And we did a life cycle analysis of a pair of jeans, and jeans consume a lot of water. 50% of the water that it consumes are in your washing machine and mine. And we here in the United States tend to wash our jeans almost every single time we wear them,
right,
which is really wrong. And we wash them in the washing machine, which is really wrong. And so I famously said, and this I still get on my news feed. Yeah. It gets picked up like every week.
Every week.
I was misquoted. What I said was, you don't need to wash your jeans in a washing machine. I said what I actually said was, these jeans have never seen the inside of a washing machine. The headline the next day was, Levi's CEO never washes his jeans. But seriously, the way I wash my jeans, and this is
really
also, found its way around the world. I either hand wash, kind of spot clean them. If I spill some spaghetti sauce or something, I'll spot clean them.
Yep.
And if they get really, really gross, I'll wash them the way I did when I used to backpack around Europe, which is hop in the shower.
Oh, you wear them.
Hop in the shower, soap them down, rinse them off, take them out, take them off.
So now the headline is going to be CEO, take
Wash
full
your-
showers.
Oh, there's
goes in the shower fully dressed.
Trust me, there is a YouTube video on this. There is a YouTube video on this. Some reporter tested it, and actually but all seriousness, products made out of cotton. Some might have some stretch and have a little bit of polyester or something, but the fibers in cotton get destroyed in a washing machine. And so if you want to really, especially if you buy good quality denim, like really good quality denim, you just don't want to throw them in a washing machine. You're going to destroy them much faster than they would last otherwise if you really took care of them. And by the way, it's better for planet Earth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Who knew this was going to be our best question? Really capitalized.
I told you I was a storyteller.
Well, I have one more question, and then we're going to have to end. This has been just amazing. But I'm curious that a lot of things we'll teach. This is my question, but a lot of things we'll teach in marketing is new marketing is not about customer acquisition, getting everybody on the planet to buy a new pair of jeans, but it's to go deeper into your customer base and sell them more, which suggests that you move off of jeans into other kinds of product categories or other services. You cross-sell and you build out your portfolio that way. Do you have a feeling about that as a philosophy?
Yeah, well, last time I checked, we don't have 100% market share. So the first opportunity that we've got is to continue to build market share. And, I do think we live in a world where there is overconsumption, and I think that is going to change. I think the sustainability thing and young consumers being really concerned about planet Earth, and they know when they buy something from fast fashion and wear it 3 times and throw it in the garbage, it winds up in the landfill. And this is not good for planet Earth. I think consumers are going to buy fewer things that are more versatile, that are better quality, that are going to last longer. That plays right to our sweet spot. That's what we're all about. Quality never goes out of style. And so I do think over time, our aspiration, and Michelle is taking this to the next level, her ambition is to drive this brand to be a denim lifestyle brand. And that's a pretty big house to live under. We got to get it right, first on men's and women's bottoms, then men's and women's tops. But where it goes from there, remains. But thinking about other revenue streams is really, really important. And in today's world, we're testing Levi'sSecondhand.com where people can buy secondhand Levi's.
Oh, wow.
So, all of these could be, it's a science project right now. It's really, really small, but it could be, another revenue stream down the road for us.
Okay, we got one last question that we got to hit because people are really interested in this. Can you talk about vintage and resale with regard to Levi's? There are a lot of people who are now into thrifting and secondhand. What's your take on that?
I have no data to back this up, but we're the number one brand in thrift stores because people love the hunt. And vintage is something. I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and she's really into it. And vintage is something that authenticates the value of this brand.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it.
Yeah.
You'll pay $250 for a 25-year-old trucker jacket that you could buy brand new for $150. Mm-hmm. You'll pay a premium for something that's 25 years old. It says the value of this brand. Right. And so we are really big in thrift stores, and that's why we started up this secondhand online business. But it also does authenticate the power of this brand and the fact that people want to hunt for something that is 20 or 25 years old, that there's added value in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
that's incredible.
Yeah. You got one more question? Or
well, it's a sociological exercise. It's your point, Chip, about the brand being so nostalgically powerful and iconic. It's just one of these things in human nature that says, I want to seek out those things that have this sort of value that's associated with it. And you're willing to hunt. The experience piece, right? Because it's sociological, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very, very cool.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's live edition of Marketing Matters. Thank you so much for being here, Chip. It's really been inspirational.
It's been so much fun. Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
both of you.
We'd also like to thank our producers, Deion Simpkins, Dana Cash, Aaron Tran, and our Knowledge at Wharton team. And we thank you to everyone who tuned in to contribute to this live, engaging conversation. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter at knowledge.wharton.upenn.edu to stay updated on future events like this one. If you like what you heard today, tune in live every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Sirius XM Channel 132. This is Marketing Matters. I'm Barbara Kahn, here with Americus Reed, Business Radio, Sirius XM 132.